Hi, Julie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I have a question.
Mhm.
I am curious, when was your first piece of chocolate? And when did you realize chocolate was significant for you?
I was 3 years old, and we were in a little town called Neskowin in Oregon. And my dad and I walked to the little tiny convenience store. I mean, there's no shops or anything there. It's exactly the way it was today as it was when I was 3. More houses, a lot more houses, but the little shop is still there. And then that's it. That's the only thing the town has, a little restaurant and a shop. And from our beach house, we would walk down. The driveway was not paved at that time, very sandy, a lot of dune grass. And then you kind of have these tall pine trees. And then there's this little bridge. And at 3 years old, this was a huge adventure. I'm sure for my dad, going a quarter of a mile was not that huge of an adventure. But for me, there are so many different elements, different topographies, different things. We're walking by the dune hills with the grass, and all of a sudden we were in this rainforest, and there's a little bridge, and it was just this whole thing. It was like really, truly hiking across the country. So we start heading back from the shop, and we stop in the pine trees. I remember we stopped in the pine trees. And it was just my dad and I, and he pulled out this little brown piece of something. And he just looked at me. He said, "Try this." And I remember, oh gosh, do I remember it? I took it. I can feel it in my fingers right now. And I looked at it, and I remember putting it in my mouth. And I remember this sensation of my teeth biting through it. And then something happened. I didn't just chew it up and swallow it. I kind of chewed it, but all of a sudden it melted and it covered my palate. And it was like cellular awakening. It was like every cell in my body, every last bit of my entire body from my head to my toes wiggled and was like, oh, what is this? And the trees started like becoming animated, and there was fairies, and I mean, it was just like magic. I was like, oh my gosh, what was that? And it was just brief. It was like super split second. I was like, there's something to this that is not like anything I've ever eaten or tried in my life. And so that was my first taste of chocolate. And that was the first inkling I got that there is something more to chocolate. And as I got older and I learned that it was called the food of the gods, I was like, okay, there's a reason that the alchemists or shaman or whomever 2,000 years ago said this is the food of the gods. And it's not because it's a piece of candy, because when they tasted it, it wasn't a poured chocolate. It wasn't a hard chocolate. It was a paste. And there was something else going on, and they weren't worried about the cardiovascular benefits. They weren't worried that it was a vasodilator, none of that, or that it was great. It helped reverse tooth decay. If you eat enough of it, it helps, work as an SPF for your skin. I mean, there's so many amazing benefits that come with chocolate. But back then, when they called it a food of the gods, there was something else, and it was a spiritual connection, and probably very similar to the connection that I had at that time. And I spent many, many years trying to figure this out. And, I did a lot of research. I developed multiple kinds of chocolates. I developed chocolate powders and chocolate face and chocolate hair masks and body paints. And I mean, everything. And really have had a wonderful time sharing chocolate with the world around me. And then that's when I remember Is it the Big Sur Wine Festival, Julie?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was the Big Sur Wine Fest, and they used my house as one of their, or my property as one of their mystery houses that they were going to take people to. And so people came, and I had cocoa all over the place, and I made a ton of chocolate for people coming through, and I had my cocoa pods there. And I had never really shared the story of cacao the way that I shared it at that particular time. I mean, normally when I'm just talking to someone, it's just more of a gift. And I don't know what happened, but when I was at that time, there was 2 women there, and they wanted to talk about the cocoa pods. So all of a sudden, this changed the story away from chocolate to the tree. And I told them the story of cacao. And that's the first time that I had actually shared the story of cacao in a setting that had multiple people milling around, kind of exploring the grounds. And sure enough, all of a sudden, as I'm telling the story of cacao, I have a crowd of people. And it actually brought tears to people's eyes. And that's when I knew that the story of cacao, truly what I was experiencing and what I was sharing in these little bits of chocolate, audibly as I was sharing it, woke it up to a whole new way to do this. And so then I ended up sharing that story. And then the Esalen Institute invited me to come down to share the story of cacao. And now I wrote a little book, and it's not a very long book because it doesn't need to be long, but it is the story of cacao. And it is probably one of the most beautiful things that I've ever been able to share. And it's not necessarily derived from me. It's derived from that connection, literally starting at 3 years old. And it's the way that I can share it with you guys.
That's beautiful. Thank you.